Hi, I'm Daniele. I work for Not on the High Street in London. Not on the High Street is a marketplace for small creative businesses. We are in Richmond. Richmond is one of the best parts of London. There are incredible parks and riverside pubs. And it doesn't feel like London at all. It feels like a country village inhabited by like ambassadors and rich bankers' wives and tech companies. Also, Richmond is where the Rolling Stones formed, and some of us care a lot about the Rolling Stones. This is a talk about being on call, carrying a pager, being available 24. If you are a DevOps or a developer, you might already know something about this topic. If you are a data engineer, I'm going to make a case that you should care more about this topic. But I will also talk about a TV show, and there is an embarrassingly high number of pictures of my cats. And it's a Friday afternoon talk, so I'm going to warm you up by asking you questions, and you're going to raise your hands to answer. Who is on call right now? Good. Who was on call in the last month? Who was actually called in the last month? Okay, if you did raise your hand the second time and you didn't raise your hand the third time, well, you're living the dream. Money for nothing and chips for free. On the menu for you today, we start with light definition. We move on to some mixed advice on what to do during an actual incident. Then we have our prevention special, and then we move a bit with a farther view, and we talk about motivations and alerting practices. And in the spirit of total transparency, I have a couple of stories to follow, and luckily enough, one was from last week. So some of you already know, but being on call means you have a phone, used to be a pager in the 80s, and when it rings, you need to go and fix the system because it's broken. Another way to think about it is basically you have something that is with you at all times, and you need to care about it, but secretly it hates you, and it will demand your attention at the most inopportune times. And when it wants your attention, you have to really give it immediately. But being on call is also about knowledge, about being the first person who will act on a certain system in case of a problem. So you get to know an entire system, not only just the parts you did develop. And you will also get some rewards because you deserve them. Rewards like being woken up in the middle of the night. So last Thursday, my phone rang at about 1 a.m. And before you get to your computer, you want to make sure you are awake. You're fully awake, so make some tea, make some coffee, walk off the sleep a bit. It transition, like going from your sleeping self or your working self if the incident is during office hours, to your incident self. So you don't want to be the guy who is developing on one window and fixing production on the other window. That's just, the incident deserves your full attention. And the first thing you do is you're going to read the alert that woke you up. Like, really read it. At least a couple of times, possibly more. Once you've read it, you probably know where to look. Like, which system broke? Where can I find the error logs? Where can I find the monitoring data? And you want to gather as much information as you can until you can basically be sure of why did this alert trigger? Like, what did wake me up? And at this point, you probably have enough information to assess the impact. What is going to happen because of this problem? Who is not going to be able to do their job? Who is not going to be able to know something they want to know? And be nice. If people are impacted by the problem, inform them. Most websites have status pages. For internal systems, you probably have an email or a chat tool. And there is a question you might find yourself asking a lot, which is why? What is the real deep cause of this problem? And this is not the right time to answer it. If you are going to dive into, with your developer mind, try to find out the real root of cause of the problem, you're going to spend a possibly very long amount of time, and you cannot quantify it. So don't do it. It's not productive at this time. And as you find out informations, as you start acting on the system, log what you're doing. So this is on a chat app, it's Slack, but you can also just open a blanket email to your team and start typing out what is happening. This is invaluable information, especially if you're preparing a talk on being on call. And once you have enough information, you probably can come up with one action or a few actions that will limit the impact as much as possible and are safe. So if we scroll back, and you probably squint a bit because I'm not sure if it's readable, you're going to find out that I did not follow my own advice. And last week, I ended up forking a library at 4 a.m. and trying to patch it. It did not solve absolutely anything. And that's because instead of focusing on taking the smallest piece of action, I actually started asking myself why. And that was not useful at the time. The action I should have taken, which we only took in the morning, was just to skip that data integration step. True, we wouldn't have known on the day after what the sources of our traffic were, but at least we would have had all the rest of the data in time. Once you've taken enough steps to limit the impact, again, be nice, inform the people who are impacted, and then get back to sleep. Because you want to be fresh on the next day. Usually, you wake up the day after, and your first thought in your mind is, this is all pretty stressful. I don't want it to happen ever again. And at this point, you can really ask yourself why this error occurred. And the best way to do it is an RCA. There is best practices and extensive literature on RCAs, so I'm not going to dive too deep, just one slide. You want to put your detective hat on, gather all the information on what actually happened during the incident and before the incident, find the root causes, and be sure to leave enough time at the end to decide on some actions that will mitigate those root causes. And it's very easy, in this case, to try to blame someone. Don't do it. So I'm going to tell you a story. It's about a nurse in a childcare hospital. She gave the wrong drug to a little child, and the child almost died. So an inquiry was opened, and there was a proposal to fire the nurse. But then the commission on the inquiry dived a bit deeper, and they found that the drug she should have administered and the drug she actually administered were one next to each other in the same cabinet, and they had similar labels. And they also found out that the nurse had been working 10 hours straight, and there was nobody to double-check what medicines, what drugs she was administering. So don't allow yourself to focus on the fault of one person. Always look at the context. And from an RCA, you usually get some useful lessons for the future. You probably are already familiar with this. Be really careful where your systems talk to a third party. And because communication is more scarce and more easily ignored. And watch out for point of friction in internal communication as well. So the root cause for last week's failure was that the GA reporting API has a time on site field, and they renamed it to session duration, and the old name was deprecated in 2014, but they actually started enforcing the deprecation and failing on API calls last week. Another insight is to really care about your error messages. Keep them up to date, make sure they include everything that can help you during an incident, so checklists, lesson learned, encouragement. So we took 3 actions. We fixed the root cause of the problem. We renamed the time on site to session duration. We scheduled some time to go through all the GA fields that we are using and check if any other of them is deprecated. But we also included in the alert message a specific suggestion not to do what I did. So just skip the step. Don't try to dive into causes too much. So let's take a step back to 2015, and let's take a broader view. Downton Abbey is a TV show about a wealthy aristocrat British family in the first half of the 20th century. It is wonderfully acted. The sceneries, the costumes, the settings are amazing. And it's really on target for Not on the High Street. It's very British. It's so much on target that when we placed a TV advert during the first episode of the season, on a Sunday evening in October 2015, we had so much sales and so much additional traffic that the site went down. It recovered, and then it went down again when the same advert aired on the +1 channel. On one side, I was sort of lucky because I was not directly involved with the consumer website. But on the other side, the situation on the data infrastructure, which I looked after, was a lot worse. So we had basically no data since Saturday morning because the replica of the production database we used to read from was offline. We were in the process of migrating between hosting providers, and there hadn't been enough communication on when the replication between environments will stop. And the only person who could really fix all of this mess was our databases and networking expert, DevOps. And he was on a plane back from Russia. As soon as he landed, like late Sunday evening, his phone rang so many times that by the time he got home, his battery had drained down. Why did we care? 2 incidents at the same time, one on the consumer website, one on the data infrastructure that we would have used to evaluate the impact of the consumer website incident. And it was a Sunday evening. So the next day is a Monday. On Mondays, our data infrastructure sees the most usage because it's both the busiest trading day and also the day where we plan for the week ahead. I do not like Mondays. And this was not a normal Monday. At the time, we were a lot more inexperienced than we are today. And we learned a lot from these events. We learned as an organization, we learned as a team, and we changed. So let's talk a bit about the changes we made. How do you answer this question? Well, you look at consequences of an error. Who is affected by the service or the data being unavailable or wrong? Do they depend on your service? How much will it cost? How much time can they wait for the information? In 2015, we were realizing that our coworkers and our colleagues were increasingly dependent on our data infrastructure, especially for decision making. So if you have a public-facing service or a public-facing website, you probably want to consider some kind of on-call policy, because you cannot control how much the external people depend on your service. And you might also have a contract in place, or your revenue might depend on the external service. In 2016, we started offering to our partners, the people who sell on Not on the High Street, access to a rich dashboard with sales figures and product performance, and at that point, we didn't have any space to roll back the on-call policy. But even if you just have an internal service, you should consider on-call, because you want your coworkers to spend less time and worry less about checking and double-checking that the services are available. And if they spend less time doing that, they will get benefit in their daily work. If you take a step back to Downton Abbey and you sort of know the characters, it's not about just keeping happy. You also want Daisy, the assistant cook, to be the best she can be at her job. And you might pay this increased in trust with a little less control on your priorities and a little less agility as you need to react to incidents. But in the end, it will be worth it, because you are enabling others to rely on your tool, and your stability will enable their success as they build more and more on top of your data and your tools. And you will be surprised by the brilliant, creative ways in which they can use the service you provide. Enabling others. Nothing else matters. So, it's worth it. We decided it's worth it. How do we make it work? What did we do in the days, in the weeks, and the months after the Downton Abbey debacle to make sure that we could fix problems in time? Usually, the very first basic is getting an email when a certain program fails. That's the real basic. And that's what we had at the time. Then you can build on this email. You can attach certain tools that will phone and wake you up. And you can even do it yourself with Twilio if you want. And then you can also send lower priority alerts and messages to your chat or to your internal communications, so that you have a timeline of there was this low priority alert, then there was this high priority alert, and this is what happened, and it's all in one place. And in this phase, you also want to be making sure that the person answering the incident, responding to the incident, is able to do it. So make sure your logs are accessible, make sure there is documentation in place, consider training people with fake emergencies and fake incidents. The next step up in the chain is moving from gathering information just when bad things happen to gathering information all the time. So you can start with very basic information, CPU usage, RAM usage, disk usage, and then you can move up and take a broader view. How many web pages are we serving? How many jobs are running? How much data are we moving? And then you can even move even higher. How many customers are we serving? How many orders have been placed? And at this point, you can plug your alerting system on top of your monitoring system, rather than just getting an alert and getting paged when there is a problem. You can say, okay, I have a CPU, all CPUs at 100% for 10 minutes. Maybe it's time for an alert. Or I have only 8 megabytes left on my hard drive. Maybe it's time for an alert. An even higher step up the chain is looking at your monitoring, at your business data, and monitor that data itself. So you're looking at questions like, is 20,000 customers on the site normal for a Sunday evening? Have we received the data we expected from Google Analytics? Do we have a high rate of traffic that doesn't have a Google Analytics identified source? And this works really well because it's basically an alerting system for both your business and your systems. There is a lot of literature on data quality, sort of tainted by association with some well-known big software vendors. But if you discard the big software vendors, these concepts are actually general and they don't depend on specific technologies. So now we have lots of checks and alerts. Some require immediate attention, some require attention on the next day, some require attention on the next working day. And you maybe start ignoring some of them. Don't get comfortably numb. Read each alert. Make sure the team reads each alert. Respond to each alert. And also examine if that alert was useful. Can you improve it? Should you silence it? Should you measure something else? And then classify alerts. Classify them by system, by kind of problem, by business area, by priority. Ideally, every new feature or every new bug has monitoring and alerting attached. And over time, you can use information you gather this way to guide your decisions. Guide your technical decisions, guide your product decisions. So I have a very opinionated selection of resources. Blog from Julia Evans, a conversation on Twitter with Charity Majors, the nurse stories stolen from this course on business ethics. I cannot recommend this course enough. Even if it doesn't almost cover on call, it's a really good course. And the last one is a 2013 book on data quality, which still holds well enough. So I just want to say thank to all the DevOps and engineers and developers who have been on call for years and make the internet work.
Thank you for your presentation. And now for questions and answers.
You've mentioned training people with like fake emergencies and stuff like that. Like, how do you simulate that? Do you actually like break something on a staging environment, or what do you do to get that?
I actually break production. on purpose during office hours. That's how I do it.
Nice.
I'm not telling you to do it, but that's actually how we do it in my team.
When you're continuing on this, when you break on production, do you have also an alternative backup system, or?
It depends on the breakage. If we are causing a breakage on purpose, we tend not to do something that will actually go to the customers. So maybe we put a wrong string for the connection database, and then we make it fail before it deploys. So that we tend not to do anything that will actually impact people. I also look after a lot of ETLs, so you can make an ETL fail in the middle of the day, and the data will still be the same data you gather at the beginning of the day. So that's another way to do it. That's mostly how we do it, actually.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? No? Oh.
It's kind of unrelated, but are those your cats?
Yes, yes. The gray one is Estia, and the white one is Philo.
Thanks, and I know what you feel when they call you. And which kind of software do you use for monitoring your either your system or your data?
So this layer is Datadog. They have a booth just right outside. For this layer, we use a data democratization tool called Redash. It's a wonderful tool, and I strongly encourage you to try Redash. It's in Python, by the way. Obviously, there are alternatives. There's as much as alternatives as you can think of.
Okay, do we have another question? If not, we can thank our speaker.